On a cold Los Angeles night, Keanu Reeves stopped for gas and saw a pregnant woman struggling to lift heavy boxes in the rain while her little girl drew quietly beside the pumps. What he did next left every witness speechless and turned a forgotten dream into something the world would never forget. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain had turned the streets of Los Angeles into ribbons of silver, reflecting the glow of streetlights and the red and blue shimmer of a half-flickering gas station sign. The hour was late, the kind of silence that hums between heartbeats, broken only by the low murmur of engines and the whisper of drizzle hitting the asphalt. A black motorcycle cut through that quiet, its headlights slicing through the mist before slowing to a stop beside pump number 3. Keanu Reeves pulled off his helmet, shaking loose the dampness from his dark hair. The smell of rain and gasoline mingled in the air, heavy yet strangely comforting. He reached for the nozzle, filling his tank like he had done countless times before. But tonight, something felt different off somehow, heavier than the drizzle that clung to his jacket. His eyes caught movement at the far end of the station, where a woman in a thin uniform struggled to lift a box onto a shelf. She was pregnant. The roundness of her belly pressed against the fabric of her shirt as she leaned forward, wincing from the strain. Her face was pale under the harsh fluorescent lights, but her movements were steady, practiced, determined. Even as the wind whipped her hair across her face, she didn't stop. Keanu froze for a moment, watching as she wiped her hands on a worn apron and hurried to the next car that had pulled in. Her name tag, barely legible beneath smudges of oil, read Emily. She moved between pumps, like a machine wound by necessity, never slowing down, never pausing to rest. Her jacket was too thin for the cold, and her shoes were soaked through, but there was no trace of complaint in her expression. Each gesture was efficient, checking oil, cleaning windows, collecting cash. Yet behind that rhythm, Keanu noticed something that struck deeper than exhaustion. It was the quiet endurance of someone who couldn't afford to break. He turned slightly, scanning the dimly lit station. Under the awning, sitting on a faded plastic chair near a stack of old magazines, was a little girl no more than 8 years old. Her knees were pulled close to her chest, her small hands clutching a stubby red pencil as she leaned over a sheet of paper balanced on her lap. A soft halo of neon light reflected off her dark curls. Even from a distance, Keanu could see the concentration in her expression. She was drawing. The rain tapped rhythmically on the metal roof above her, but she didn't seem to notice. The girl's lips moved silently, as if narrating her own imagined world. Her paper was damp around the edges, the pencil lines deep and deliberate. Beside her lay 2 other short pencils, one blue, one yellow, their wood worn from use. Despite the cold, she appeared calm, content, safe in the small bubble of creativity that surrounded her. Keanu's gaze drifted between the girl and the woman. The connection was obvious. The same brown hair, the same tired kindness in their eyes. The sight tightened something in his chest. There was love there, unmistakable and fragile, but also struggle. Emily returned to the counter, rubbing her lower back discreetly before picking up another box. Keanu noticed how she flinched slightly, hiding her pain behind a faint smile when a customer handed her change. Her exhaustion wasn't loud, it was quiet, the kind that settles deep in the bones. And yet she carried herself with dignity, with an almost stubborn grace. A gust of wind blew through the station, scattering bits of paper near Sophia's feet. The girl bent quickly to catch her drawing before it could blow away. Keanu stepped closer, curiosity getting the better of him. From where he stood, he could see the outlines of her picture tables, chairs, pots steaming on a stove, and a counter with an empty sign above it. It looked like a restaurant, sketched with surprising detail for a child her age. But there was one space left blank, an unfinished name waiting to be written. Keanu tilted his head slightly. The sight was simple, yet something about it tugged at him. The drawing felt more like a message than a picture, something incomplete and yearning. He watched as Sophia shaded the corner of a window, her tiny hands trembling slightly from the cold. Behind her, Emily's reflection appeared in the glass, weary and soaked but still working. The contrast was striking, the innocence of creation and the fatigue of survival framed in the same moment. Keanu felt an unexpected ache in his chest, a quiet empathy rising like a tide he couldn't ignore. He had seen exhaustion before, had known what it meant to fight through invisible battles. But there was something different here, something raw, human, and profoundly real. A car honked sharply at the far end of the lot, snapping the silence. Emily straightened, forcing a polite smile as she hurried to the driver's window. Her voice was gentle, apologetic, as she explained that she'd be right there. The customer muttered something impatient, but Emily didn't react. She just nodded and kept moving. Keanu watched the scene unfold, the drizzle blurring the edges of the light, turning everything into a painting of quiet struggle. He didn't know her story, he didn't know her name. But in that single moment, watching a woman labor through fatigue and a child hold on to imagination like it was her only shelter, he knew he couldn't simply drive away. Something deep inside told him this night was about to change everything. Keanu stayed by his bike, pretending to check the fuel meter, though his mind was somewhere else entirely. The sound of the rain blended with the steady beeping of the pumps, a strange kind of rhythm that matched the heaviness in his chest. He could have left, he had no reason to linger, but something rooted him to that spot. Emily walked past him carrying a squeegee, her steps slow and careful under the weight she carried. The sleeve of her jacket brushed his arm lightly as she passed. He caught a faint scent of detergent and rain, the smell of long shifts and unbroken effort. Her hands were cracked, her nails chipped, but she moved with pride, never showing self-pity. At that moment, Sophia looked up from her drawing and noticed Keanu watching her. Their eyes met briefly, and she smiled shyly before glancing back down. The red pencil moved again, finishing a door on the restaurant she was building in her imagination. Keanu took a slow breath. He had spent years around sets filled with lights, cameras, and scripts that shaped emotions into stories. Yet what he saw here, this quiet resilience, this unspoken love between mother and daughter, was more cinematic than anything he'd ever performed. The rain grew heavier. A truck pulled away, splashing through a puddle, sending a thin mist of cold water across the station. Emily didn't flinch. She wiped her face with her sleeve and continued working. Keanu's gaze lingered on her until the image seared itself into his memory. A woman, fighting through the storm, holding her world together, one long night at a time, and a child dreaming beside her. He didn't know it yet, but this ordinary encounter was the beginning of something extraordinary. As the last customer drove away, the gas station fell silent except for the rain. The flickering neon sign buzzed above, casting a faint red glow over the wet pavement. Emily leaned against the counter for a moment, rubbing her lower back. Her face softened when she looked toward Sophia, who was still sketching diligently, lost in her world of colors and imagination. Keanu placed the fuel cap back on his motorcycle but didn't move to leave. The scene before him felt frozen in time, a mother enduring, a child dreaming. It stirred something deep within him, a memory of nights when he, too, had stood in the rain, wondering if quiet goodness ever truly mattered. Sophia yawned and stretched her small arms, clutching her paper carefully to keep it from getting wet. She showed it to her mother with a proud grin. Even from where he stood, Keanu could make out the drawing: a cozy little restaurant, tables lined with flowers, warm lights in the windows. But the sign above the door was still blank. Emily smiled tiredly and brushed a hand over her daughter's hair. "It's beautiful," she whispered, though her eyes clouded with something bittersweet. Keanu couldn't hear their words, but he could feel the meaning behind them. That picture wasn't just a dream, it was a wish, held together by love and endurance. The rain eased into a drizzle again as Keanu pulled on his gloves. He took one last look at the woman and her child, framed in the neon glow and surrounded by silence. Something inside him shifted, a quiet decision forming. He didn't know what he would do yet, but one thing was clear: he wouldn't let this story end in struggle. He would return. The next morning began the way every morning did for Emily Carter, with exhaustion disguised as determination. The alarm went off at 5:30, its shrill tone slicing through the silence of her small one-bedroom apartment. She reached across the nightstand, silencing it before the sound could wake Sophia, who was curled up beside her beneath a worn quilt. Emily lay there for a moment, listening to the rain tapping gently on the window, gathering the strength to rise. Every muscle in her body ached, her lower back throbbing from hours of standing the wise night before. But rest wasn't an option. She moved quietly through the tiny kitchen, careful not to wake her daughter. The space was cluttered but tidy, filled with small reminders of what her life used to be. Above the counter hung a faded photo of a young couple in front of a small cafe in Santa Monica, Emily and Marco, back when dreams were simple and love was easy. They had met in a cooking class, bonded over a shared passion for food, and spent nights dreaming of opening their own place. She used to believe that love and hard work could conquer anything. But time had rewritten that belief. When Emily discovered she was pregnant again, the joy she expected never came. Marco grew distant, his laughter replaced by silence, his patience by frustration. One night, without warning, he packed his bags and left. The note he left behind was short: "I can't do this again." Those 5 words had shattered something inside her. She never heard from him again. Now, every day was survival. She worked mornings cleaning offices downtown and nights at the gas station. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept food on the table and a roof over their heads. Her belly, 7 months round, made the simplest tasks harder. But she refused to complain. Sophia needed to see strength, not despair. By the time Sophia stirred, the scent of oatmeal filled the small kitchen. Emily turned, smiling softly as her daughter rubbed her eyes. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, setting a bowl on the table. Sophia climbed into her chair, her hair a tangled halo, and began to eat quietly. "Do you have to work tonight, Mama?" Sophia asked between spoonfuls. Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, baby, but I'll come home as soon as I can." Sophia looked down, stirring her oatmeal absently. "I don't like when you work at night. It's cold there." "I know," Emily said gently, reaching across to brush her daughter's cheek. "But we'll be okay. Every long night brings a better morning, remember?" Sophia nodded, repeating her mother's words softly, as if they were a spell to protect them both. Emily smiled, though her heart ached. She had learned long ago that faith wasn't always believing things would get easier, it was believing she could endure until they did. After breakfast, Emily helped Sophia into her little blue raincoat, brushing the tangles from her daughter's hair before tying it into a neat ponytail. The morning light through the thin curtains was gray and cold, promising another wet day ahead. The old apartment door creaked as they stepped into the hallway, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete. Emily carried Sophia's backpack over one arm and her own work bag over the other, her balance slightly off as she shifted under the weight of her growing belly. They walked together to the corner bus stop, the city slowly waking around them. The streets glistened from the night's rain, puddles forming tiny mirrors that reflected passing headlights. Sophia skipped in the puddles, giggling each time water splashed her boots. Emily smiled at the sound. It was the kind of small joy that kept her going. At the bus stop, Sophia looked up at her mother. "When the baby comes, will you still work at night?" she asked quietly. Emily crouched down, her knees protesting from fatigue, and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Only until we get on our feet, sweetheart," she said softly. "Then Mama will cook again, maybe even make lasagna for the whole neighborhood." Sophia's eyes brightened. "Like Grandma used to?" "Exactly like Grandma used to," Emily replied with a wistful smile. The memory of her late mother's kitchen flickered through her mind, the smell of garlic and basil, the laughter, the warmth. For a brief moment, she could almost feel that life again, before the bus's arrival jolted her back to reality. Emily dropped Sophia off at school, hugging her tightly. Then she boarded another bus that took her to the cleaning company downtown. By the time she arrived, her body already ached from the commute, but she forced herself through the motions, mopping floors, wiping glass, scrubbing sinks. She worked methodically, her thoughts drifting back to Sophia's drawing, the restaurant, the empty sign. During her short lunch break, she sat alone in the supply closet with a sandwich wrapped in foil. The hum of vacuum cleaners echoed in the distance. Emily unwrapped her sandwich, staring at it without appetite. She wondered if Marco ever thought of them, if he'd care that Sophia was growing up without him, that a new baby would soon arrive in a home barely held together. But then, she remembered Sophia's smile that morning, the way her daughter still believed the world could be kind. And she pushed the thought away. Hope, however fragile, was the only luxury they could afford. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Just one day at a time, Emily. One day at a time." By the time Emily returned home that afternoon, the sky had dimmed into another soft drizzle. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and pine from the nearby park. She changed into her gas station uniform, the name patch slightly frayed, and checked on Sophia, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by colored pencils and half-finished drawings. Sophia looked up eagerly. "Mama, look, I made a new one." She held up a sketch of a little shop with a big front window and tables outside. Above the door was a sign she had written in uneven block letters. "Mama's Kitchen." Emily smiled, her throat tightening. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her hand across the paper. "Where did you get that idea?" Sophia shrugged lightly. "I just thought, if you had your own kitchen, you wouldn't have to work 2 jobs. You could cook and stay home with me and the baby." For a moment, Emily couldn't speak. The words pierced her, deeper than Sophia could have imagined. She sat beside her daughter and pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Someday," she said softly, "we'll make that dream real. But for now, I have to keep working, so we can take care of each other, okay?" Sophia nodded, her small hands gripping the drawing like it was a promise. Later that evening, the rain began to fall harder. Emily tucked Sophia into her blanket, making sure she was warm before heading out for her night shift. Sophia whispered sleepily, "Be careful, Mama," before drifting off. Emily paused at the doorway, taking one last look at her daughter's peaceful face. The bus ride to the gas station was quiet. Streetlights glowed through fog, and reflections of passing cars slid across the windows. Emily rested a hand on her belly, feeling the baby stir. She whispered to the tiny life inside, "I'm trying, little one. I'm trying my best." When she arrived, the station lights flickered as usual, painting the wet ground in hues of red and white. She clocked in, adjusted her jacket, and began the familiar routine, restocking shelves, wiping the counter, checking fuel pumps. The hours crawled, but she moved with purpose, fueled by love more than strength. From a distance, the drizzle continued to fall, steady and endless. Much like her life, it didn't stop or wait, it simply kept going. And so did Emily. Somewhere deep down, beneath the exhaustion and the ache, she still held a tiny ember of hope, the same spark that lived in Sophia's drawings. She didn't know it yet, but fate was already turning in her favor. A quiet stranger had seen her struggle, and soon, her ordinary night would become the beginning of an extraordinary change. The evening drizzle had returned, brushing across Keanu's face like a cool whisper as he leaned against his motorcycle. The hum of traffic along the nearby boulevard faded into the background, while he watched Emily move through the fluorescent glow of the gas station. Her posture was straight, her expression calm, but her hands trembled slightly each time she lifted a box or reached for a customer's change. He could see the fatigue etched into the small movements, how she pressed her palm into the small of her back when she thought no one was looking, how she took a deep breath before forcing another polite smile. Keanu knew exhaustion when he saw it. It wasn't just physical. It was the kind of weariness that settled in the spirit after too many nights of pretending everything was fine. Emily had perfected that quiet disguise. When a man in a suit barked at her for taking too long to print a receipt, she didn't snap back or show frustration. Instead, she bowed her head slightly and said, "I'm so sorry, sir," in a tone so gentle it almost broke him to hear it. The man drove off without a thank you, leaving Emily standing there under the neon lights, looking smaller than she deserved to look. Sophia sat nearby in her same spot under the awning, knees tucked to her chest, sketching with intense focus. Every few moments she would glance up, checking that her mother was okay, then returned to her paper. Keanu found himself drawn toward her, curious about what could hold a child's attention so completely in a place like this. He approached quietly, careful not to startle her. "What are you working on there?" he asked softly. Sophia looked up, startled at first, her eyes wide. She hadn't noticed him come closer. When she saw the calmness in his expression, her fear eased. She hesitated before answering, holding out her drawing. "It's a kitchen," she said shyly. Keanu crouched down to her level. The sketch was surprisingly detailed for an 8-year-old pots on a stove, a counter filled with dishes, and little hearts drawn near the windows. Above the door was a blank rectangle. "It looks beautiful," Keanu said with genuine admiration. "What's gonna go in that empty space up there?" Sophia smiled faintly. "That's for the name." "I haven't decided yet." He nodded. "Whose kitchen is it?" She lowered her voice. "It's Mama's, when she doesn't have to work here anymore." The words hit Keanu harder than he expected. They were simple, innocent, yet filled with hope and longing. He looked from the drawing to Emily, who was bent over cleaning the windshield of another customer's car, her movements slow but steady. That picture wasn't just a child's imagination, it was a blueprint of a dream waiting for light. Keanu smiled softly, taking in every line of Sophia's drawing. "You're really good at this," he said. "Has your mom seen it?" Sophia nodded proudly. "Yes." She said it looks just like how Grandma's kitchen used to be. Her voice lowered as she added, "Mama misses Grandma a lot. Grandma used to teach her how to cook. She said Mama made the best lasagna in the world." Keanu's eyes softened. "Sounds like your mom has a gift," he said gently. "She does," Sophia replied with certainty. "She used to talk about opening her own restaurant, but now she works here instead." She glanced down at her paper, her small fingers gripping the red pencil tightly. "She says grown-ups have to do what they need to do, not what they want." Keanu looked toward Emily again. The rain had grown heavier, droplets bouncing off the metal roof of the awning where Sophia sat. Emily stood by a pump, her uniform damp from the drizzle. Even with her soaked sleeves and tired eyes, she still greeted each customer with quiet courtesy. It was as if kindness was her last defense against a world that had already taken so much. He crouched again beside Sophia, watching her color in the last bit of her sketch. "You know," he said, "sometimes dreams take a while, but if your mom has a gift, that means it's still waiting for her." Sophia tilted her head. "Waiting?" "Yeah," he said with a small smile. "Dreams don't disappear. They just wait for the right time to come true." Before Sophia could answer, Emily turned and noticed the two of them. Alarm flashed in her eyes. She hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron, trying to catch her breath. "Sophia," she said quickly, "don't bother the gentleman. He's trying to fill up." "She's not bothering me," Keanu said gently, standing up. "I was just admiring her drawing. She's talented." Emily looked embarrassed, her cheeks flushing. "I'm sorry," she said again. "She just likes to talk." "It's perfectly fine," he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. "I think she has something special." For a moment, Emily looked at him as if unsure how to respond. Her posture relaxed slightly, and a small, genuine smile broke through her tired expression. It wasn't the polite, practiced one she gave customers. It was something real, something that came from deep within. The sound of rain filled the silence between them, soft but steady. Keanu glanced once more at Sophia's drawing before saying quietly, "You have a beautiful daughter. You're doing something right." Emily lowered her gaze, the compliment catching her off guard. "Thank you," she said softly. "She's my whole world." The rain began to slow, fading into a mist that hung in the air like breath. The gas station lights flickered faintly, reflecting off puddles that mirrored the dull glow of the city skyline in the distance. Emily tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear and crossed her arms loosely, partly for warmth, partly because she didn't know what to do with her hands. "I should probably get back to work," she said, glancing toward the pumps. "There's always something to do." Keanu nodded. "I can see that," he said. But it looks like you've already done more than most people would in a whole day." Emily gave a small laugh, half surprise, half disbelief. "That's kind of you to say, but I'm just doing what I have to." She turned slightly, her eyes following Sophia, who was now humming softly to herself as she drew another picture on the damp edge of her paper. "Kids don't wait for life to get easier, so I work, and I keep going. That's all there is." Keanu watched her carefully. There was a quiet strength in her words, but also something deeply human in the way she said them, not bitterness, but acceptance. "You make it sound simple," he said. Emily shrugged. "It has to be. Complicated things fall apart. Simple ones survive." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distant rumble of thunder rolled over the city, followed by the low whoosh of a passing car. Emily turned to check the time on her watch, then glanced toward the small office behind the counter. Her manager wasn't around tonight, and that offered her a rare pocket of peace. She leaned lightly against the pillar beside the pump, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Keanu followed her gaze to Sophia, who was now standing on her chair, proudly showing her drawing to the flickering station light as if offering it to the universe. "She's got your determination," he said softly. Emily smiled, her voice gentler now. "She's stronger than she knows." She looked back at Keanu. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Keanu," he said quietly, extending his hand. Her brow furrowed for a second before realization dawned, and her eyes widened. "Wait, Keanu Reeves?" He gave a modest smile. "Guilty." For the first time that night, Emily let out a genuine laugh, a soft sound that lifted some of the heaviness in the air. "Well, that explains the motorcycle," she said, shaking her head. "I thought I recognized that voice." Keanu chuckled. "I promise I'm just another customer tonight. And I really meant what I said. You're doing an incredible job." Her smile lingered as she nodded, and for the briefest moment, the weight on her shoulders seemed to lift. "Thank you," she said. "You don't know how much it means to hear that." "Maybe I do," he replied quietly. As he mounted his motorcycle, Sophia waved from her chair, holding up her new drawing, a restaurant with a name now scribbled in red pencil. Mama's Kitchen. Keanu's heart swelled at the sight. He smiled beneath his helmet and said, "It's perfect." The engine roared softly to life. But before he left, he gave one last look at Emily and her daughter, the picture of resilience beneath a flickering light. He didn't know their story yet, but he knew this was not the last time he'd see them. Something about this night demanded more. As the motorcycle disappeared into the mist, Emily watched, unaware that this brief encounter had already altered the course of her life. Sophia tugged on her sleeve, holding up the drawing once more. "He liked it, Mama." Emily smiled, the warmth returning to her tired face. "He did, sweetheart. He really did." And somewhere down the empty road, Keanu Reeves rode on through the drizzle, his thoughts echoing with one simple truth. The night grew quieter after the last car rolled away, leaving behind the soft hiss of rain on the pavement and the distant hum of city lights. The clock above the counter read a little past midnight. Emily leaned against one of the pumps, pressing a hand to her back as she exhaled slowly. Her shoulders slumped for just a second before she straightened again, adjusting her uniform like armor. The cold air bit through her thin jacket, and she rubbed her arms to keep warm. From across the station, Keanu stood near his motorcycle, still lingering. He had no real reason to stay, but something about this place, about her, made him pause. He watched as she bent to pick up a crate of windshield fluid, struggling slightly as she lifted it onto a shelf. Without a word, he walked over and took hold of the other end of the box. She looked up, startled. "Oh, you don't have to do that," she said quickly. "I know," he replied calmly, his voice steady. "But you look like you've been carrying enough for one night." Emily hesitated, her instinct to refuse stronger than her fatigue. "Really, I've got it. It's my job." "Maybe, but even jobs allow help sometimes." After a moment of silence, she sighed and let him set the crate on the shelf beside her. "Thank you," she said, her tone polite but distant, the way someone thanks a stranger before returning to their burden. Keanu didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the pillar beside her, his jacket dripping slightly from the rain. "You've been here since before I arrived," he said casually. "Do you always work this late?" Emily nodded, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. "2 nights a week, sometimes more if they need me. It depends." He studied her face for a moment, noticing the faint circles beneath her eyes. "And during the day?" "I clean offices downtown," she said, her tone matter-of-fact, as if describing something unremarkable. "It's not much, but it pays the bills." Keanu's brow furrowed. "So, you work both shifts?" Emily gave a small laugh, one that sounded more like an exhale. "That's life, right? You do what you have to. Sophia's in school, so the daytime job keeps us afloat. The night one keeps the lights on. When do you rest?" he asked softly. Emily looked down at her hands, the faint smile still lingering but fragile now. "Rest?" she repeated, as if it were a foreign word. "I don't think about that much anymore. Bills don't wait. Rent doesn't wait. So, I just keep moving." Keanu nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling heavy between them. "That sounds hard." "It is," she admitted quietly. "But it's harder to stop, because if I stop, everything else might stop with me." For a while, neither of them spoke. The rain dripped from the station roof in steady beats, a rhythm that filled the silence between them. Emily leaned slightly against the metal pole, her gaze fixed on the glowing street beyond. Keanu could sense the exhaustion radiating off her, not the kind that came from one hard day, but from many years of them piled together. He finally broke the silence. "It must be hard raising a kid and working both jobs." Emily shrugged, a small, weary movement. "It's not easy," she admitted, "but Sophia makes it worth it. She's a good kid, kind, curious, and always dreaming." Her voice softened when she said the last word. "She deserves more than this." Keanu followed her gaze toward the corner of the station, where Sophia was now dozing lightly in her chair, her little hand still clutching her red pencil. A blanket covered her legs, one Emily had probably packed from home. It was faded and frayed at the edges, but clean, cared for. "She's lucky to have you," Keanu said. Emily's lips curved into a faint smile. "Sometimes I wonder if she'll think that when she's older. I try to give her everything, but it never feels like enough." She paused, her voice growing quieter. "Some nights, when I'm too tired to think, I worry she'll remember me as someone who only worked, someone who never had time to really live." Keanu shifted, his arms crossed loosely. "You're doing what you can. That's more than most." Emily glanced at him then, her eyes meeting his. "I used to think life would look different by now," she said softly. "I thought I'd have my own restaurant. I even had a name picked out, La Cucina di Nonna, my grandmother's kitchen. It was her dream before it was mine." Her eyes brightened faintly with the memory, then dimmed again. "But dreams don't pay rent. After my husband left, I couldn't think about anything except survival. So I folded the dream away, like an old recipe card I'd never use." Keanu stayed silent, listening. He could feel the honesty in her words, the quiet ache of someone who had traded passion for endurance. Emily rubbed her arms, the cold catching up to her again. "He left the day I told him I was pregnant with our second. Said he couldn't do it again, that we couldn't afford another mouth to feed." She swallowed, forcing the words out evenly. "I begged him to stay, not for me, but for Sophia. But he just walked out." Keanu's jaw tightened slightly, though his voice stayed calm. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." Emily exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something she had held in for too long. "It's okay," she said after a pause. "I don't hate him anymore. I just hope he never forgets the faces he left behind." Keanu stood quietly for a moment, his eyes resting on Emily as the weight of her story settled in. The rain had stopped, leaving a cool hush over the station. Water dripped from the eaves in soft intervals, and the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights filled the air. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be broken, only shared. "Do you ever get help?" he asked finally. "Family? Friends, anyone you can lean on?" Emily shook her head. "Not really. My parents passed when I was young, And Marco's family, well, they disappeared with him. Most of my friends drifted away after I had Sophia. They meant well, but people don't always know how to stay when life gets messy. She looked down, twisting the ring finger that still bore the faint mark where her wedding band had been. I learned to stop, expecting people to stick around. Keanu's gaze softened. But you didn't give up. I couldn't, she said quietly. Sophia didn't ask to be here. She deserves a life better than mine. Every time I think about quitting, I look at her and remember why I started. She paused, smiling faintly. She's stronger than I am. She's the one who reminds me that kindness still matters. Even when people are cruel to me, she says. Maybe they're just having a bad day, Mama. She's 8, and somehow she already knows how to forgive. Keanu followed her eyes to where Sophia slept. Her small face turned toward the light. The red pencil had rolled from her hand onto the ground. He picked it up and placed it carefully on the table beside her drawings. The simple act carried more emotion than words could. She must get that from you, he said softly. Emily looked at him, startled. From me? You show her love in every way that matters, Keanu said. Not through comfort or luxury, but through sacrifice. That's what she's learning. For the first time that night, Emily's composure cracked. She blinked quickly, fighting the tears that threatened to surface. You say that like it's enough. It is, he replied. You're showing her how to keep going, even when life doesn't make it easy. That's worth more than you think. She exhaled shakily, finally allowing one tear to slip down her cheek. Quickly, she brushed it away. You don't even know us, she whispered. Maybe not, Keanu said gently, but I know strength when I see it. And I know that sometimes the people who give the most are the ones the world overlooks. Emily tried to smile, but it trembled. You talk like someone who's seen too much. He nodded faintly. Maybe I have. But I've also learned that small moments, the ones that seem ordinary, can change everything. A faint rustle came from the corner as Sophia stirred in. Her chair. Emily instinctively went to her, adjusting the blanket over her shoulders. Keanu watched the tenderness in that simple act, the care that asked for nothing in return, and something inside him shifted. As Emily turned back, their eyes met once more. Thank you for listening, she said softly. People don't usually ask. Sometimes listening is the only help that matters. The quiet returned, not heavy this time, but peaceful. A small warmth filled the cold space between them. Keanu stepped back toward his motorcycle, sensing that words would only cheapen the moment. As he put on his gloves, Emily called out, her voice hesitant but sincere. Drive safe, Keanu. He turned and smiled. You too, Emily. And tell Sophia her drawing's going to come true someday. Emily tilted her head, confused but touched. You think so? I don't think, he said, starting the engine. I believe. The low rumble of the motorcycle echoed softly through the damp night as he rode away. Emily stood there for a long time after he was gone, the sound fading into the city's hum. For the first time in months, she felt something stir beneath the exhaustion, a small, fragile feeling she hadn't dared to name, hope. The next night, the rain returned soft, steady, and rhythmic against the awning of the gas station. Emily was wiping down the pumps, her movements slower than usual. The day's fatigue sat heavy in her limbs, but she pushed through as always. The quiet between customers gave her small moments to breathe, to think, to feel the weight of the life she carried. Keanu's motorcycle rolled in again, the familiar low hum breaking through the drizzle. Emily looked up from her work, surprised but unable to hide the flicker of warmth in her expression. She hadn't expected to see him again. You came back, she said, her voice carrying a mix of surprise and curiosity. Keanu smiled faintly as he removed his helmet, shaking the rain from his hair. I was in the neighborhood, he replied lightly, though they both knew that wasn't true. He refueled his bike, but didn't rush to leave. Instead, he leaned against the pump, watching as Emily stacked boxes near the counter. You work every night? He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes observant. Almost, she said. Some nights are slower, like this one, but it adds up. Keanu tilted his head. And Sophia? She stays with you? Emily nodded toward the awning where Sophia sat sketching again, her small face illuminated by the station light. She likes being near me. I tell her she should be home asleep, but she says the sound of the rain helps her draw. Keanu smiled softly. She's something special. She is, Emily said, a quiet pride rising in her tone. She's the reason I keep going. For a few moments, silence filled the space between them. The only sounds were the soft hum of the pumps and the tapping of rain on metal. Then Keanu spoke again, gently. Last night, Sophia showed me her drawing, the restaurant. She said it's yours. Emily froze for a heartbeat, then let out a small, embarrassed laugh. That girl has such an imagination. I tell her stories sometimes old, memories from when I used to cook with my grandmother. She turned it into this whole dream of us having our own place. Keanu's voice was quiet, careful. So, it's not just her dream then? Emily hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the rag in her hand. It was mine once, she admitted softly. A long time ago. Emily stood still for a moment, as if weighing whether to say more. The drizzle thickened into a light rain, echoing softly against the roof of the station. She placed the rag down, her gaze drifting toward Sophia, who was humming quietly while coloring another drawing. When I was younger, she began, her voice calm but tinged with longing. I used to spend summers in my grandmother's kitchen in Italy. Her name was Rosa, but everyone called her Nana. She cooked like the world depended on it always, from the heart. There was laughter, music, the smell of herbs drying near the window. It was home. Her words lingered, carried by the rain. Keanu listened without interruption, his eyes steady on her face. I learned everything from her, Emily continued. How to make pasta from scratch. How to season with love instead of measurements. How to turn even the simplest meal into something special. When she passed away, I promised myself I'd keep that spirit alive. She smiled faintly, though it trembled. I used to dream of opening a small restaurant called La Cucina di Nonna. It would have been cozy, full of light, with family recipes on the walls and laughter spilling out of every corner. Keanu could hear the shift in her tone, the way warmth and sorrow danced together in her words. So what happened? He asked softly. Emily gave a short, humorless laugh. Life happened. Bills, rent, responsibilities. Marco and I tried at first, but it was too much. We barely scraped by. Then I got pregnant again, and well, you already know how that story ended. She looked down, her fingers tracing invisible lines, on the counter. After he left, that dream became something I folded away like an old letter, too painful to read again. The rain eased slightly, turning into a soft mist. Keanu shifted his weight, his voice quiet, but thoughtful. Do you ever think about it now? Cooking again, I mean. Emily looked up at him, her expression distant, reflective. Sometimes, when I have a quiet night and Sophia's asleep, I'll make something small, soup, pasta, lasagna, just to remember what it feels like. But it's not the same anymore. Cooking used to mean freedom. Now it just means keeping us fed. Keanu nodded slowly. It still sounds like passion to me. She met his eyes, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. Passion doesn't pay rent, she said softly. Dreams don't put food on the table. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. His next words came out gently, but with a quiet strength that made Emily pause. Sometimes dreams feed the soul first. The words hung between them, powerful and disarming. Emily looked at him, unsure how to respond. For a long moment, the rain filled the silence where words would have been. Emily turned slightly, pretending to straighten the stack of receipts near the register, though it was clear she just needed something to do with her hands. His words had touched something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Dreams feed the soul. She repeated it silently. as if testing the truth of it against the hardness of her reality. She gave a soft, uncertain laugh. "That sounds like something my grandmother would have said. She used to tell me that cooking wasn't about recipes, it was about giving people a piece of your heart. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Her voice faltered. "I don't know if I have enough of that heart left to give anymore." Keanu's voice was gentle but firm. "You do. It's still there. You're just using it differently right now." Emily met his eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so," he said quietly. "It's in everything you do. The way you work, the way you care for your daughter. You haven't lost it. You've just been surviving. But that doesn't mean the dream's gone." She looked away, the corner of her mouth twitching into a sad smile. "It's strange hearing that from you." "Why?" "Because you're Keanu Reeves," she said with a trace of humor. "People like you talk about scripts and spotlights. People like me talk about overdue bills and car repairs. We don't live in the same world." Keanu tilted his head slightly, the rain glistening on his leather jacket. "Maybe not," he said. "But the heart doesn't care about worlds. Everyone's trying to hold on to something that gives them meaning." Her eyes softened at that, and for a fleeting moment, she looked like someone who believed again. The quiet stretched between them, full of unspoken thoughts. Sophia stirred under the awning, her pencil slipping from her fingers as she drifted deeper into sleep. Emily followed Keanu's gaze toward her daughter and sighed. "She keeps that dream alive for me. Sometimes I think she believes in it more than I ever did. Maybe she needs to. Kids see things we forget." "Maybe," Keanu said. "Or maybe she just learned to believe because you showed her how." Emily blinked, caught off guard by his words. She turned toward him, studying his face as if seeing him for the first time. "You really think I've done something right?" "I don't think," he replied softly. "I see it." For a long time, she said nothing. The sound of rain filled the stillness again, rhythmic and soothing. Emily looked back toward Sophia. Then, at the pumps, the counter, the shelves, this tiny world that had become her cage. "Sometimes I wonder," she whispered, "what it would feel like to live without fear, to wake up and do something that mattered to me again." Keanu's expression grew thoughtful, almost resolute. "Maybe that feeling isn't gone. Maybe it's just waiting for you to notice it again." Emily smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "You make it sound so easy." He shook his head. "It's not easy, but it's possible." The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle now, the station lights flickering against the wet pavement. Emily checked her watch and exhaled. "It's late. You should get home." "I will," Keanu said, his voice calm, steady. "But thank you for sharing your story. Not everyone has the courage to speak about their dreams." She gave a small, self-conscious shrug. "It's just talk." "Maybe," he said, with a quiet smile. "But talk can change things." He put on his helmet and swung his leg over the motorcycle. As the engine came to life, Emily looked at him one last time. "You're different, you know," she said. "Most people just fill up and drive away." He looked back at her, eyes warm beneath the visor. "Maybe I'm not most people." The engine revved softly, and before he pulled out onto the road, he added one last thing. "Don't give up on that kitchen. Some dreams deserve a second chance." Emily stood there, long after he was gone, the rain settling into silence again. She looked at Sophia sleeping peacefully under the awning, then at the faint reflection of herself in the glass window. For the first time in years, she didn't see just a tired woman in a uniform. She saw the faint outline of a cook, a creator, a dreamer buried under the weight of life. And though she didn't know it yet, the man who'd just driven off into the night had already made up his mind. He would return, and when he did, her life would never look the same again. The morning light crept through the gray clouds, soft and cool against the damp streets. Emily rubbed her tired eyes as she locked the door to the gas station's back office. The night had dragged on longer than usual, and her body felt heavier with each step. She had been awake for almost 20 hours straight, and even breathing felt like work. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked her pay envelope into her jacket pocket. Sophia waited near the counter, her backpack hanging off one shoulder, sketchbook tucked under her arm. She looked sleepy but cheerful, waving goodbye to the other attendant before turning to her mother. "Can we go home now, Mama?" "In a minute, sweetheart," Emily said softly. "I just need to close out the register." The morning was still quiet. The rain had finally stopped, leaving a thin layer of mist across the pavement. Emily stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. The world looked calm for once. No customers, no engines, no rush. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, grateful for the small moment of peace. Then she heard it, the deep, familiar rumble of a motorcycle engine rolling down the street. Her heart skipped. She turned, and there he was again. The same black motorcycle, glistening with droplets of rain, pulled up beside pump number 3. Keanu Reeves removed his helmet, his expression calm and easy. His jacket was still damp from the ride, but his eyes carried a warmth that immediately broke through the morning chill. Emily blinked in disbelief. "You again?" she asked, unable to hide the small smile tugging at her lips. "Good morning," Keanu said, his voice steady and kind. "I told you I'd be around." She raised an eyebrow, trying to mask the confusion and maybe the hint of relief she felt seeing him again. "You make a habit of visiting gas stations after midnight and coming back at sunrise?" "Only the special ones," he replied lightly, setting down 2 large paper bags on the counter near her. Emily frowned, glancing at them. "What's all this?" "Just something for you and Sophia," he said. Sophia perked up at the mention of her name, her sleepy eyes instantly brightening. She stepped closer, curious. "For us?" Keanu nodded. "Go on, take a look." Emily hesitated, her protective instincts immediately surfacing. "You really don't have to." "I know I don't," he interrupted gently, "but I wanted to." With careful movements, he opened one of the bags. Inside were fresh groceries, milk, fruit, vegetables, and a few pantry staples. In the other bag were a couple of folded shirts, a new raincoat small enough to fit Sophia, and a neatly wrapped box of colored pencils with a tiny silver ribbon on top. Sophia gasped softly, her eyes going wide. "Are these really for me?" "They're yours," Keanu said with a smile. "I remembered how much you love drawing." Sophia reached for the box, as if it were made of glass, holding it with both hands against her chest. The silver ribbon shimmered faintly under the soft morning light. "There's so many colors," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "Mama, look." Emily turned her gaze toward the groceries and clothes on the counter, her expression shifting between gratitude and discomfort. "You really didn't have to do this," she said again, her tone polite but guarded. "We're okay." Keanu nodded, his voice calm. "I know you are, but sometimes being okay isn't enough." Emily's jaw tightened slightly. "We don't take charity," she said quietly. "I appreciate the thought, but I can't accept this." Keanu looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded flyer. He placed it gently on the counter between them. "Then don't think of it as charity," he said. "Think of it as a chance." Emily frowned and picked up the paper. The words printed across the top read, "Culinary Training Program for Single Mothers." She skimmed the small text beneath it: professional cooking classes, flexible schedules, childcare included, job placement opportunities. Her hands froze. "What is this?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "A program I found last night," Keanu explained. "It's run by a nonprofit that helps women restart careers they once dreamed of. They focus on cooking, catering, restaurant management, all the things you told me about." Emily blinked at the paper, as though it were written in another language. "You remembered?" "I remember everything," he said softly. "You told me about La Cucina di Nonna, about how you wanted to build something warm and real. You spoke about it like it was still alive somewhere in you." Her throat tightened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Sophia tugged on her sleeve, smiling up at her mother. "Mama, you can do it," she said eagerly. "You can make the restaurant from my drawings." Emily looked at her daughter, then back at Keanu. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "These things cost money. I can't just walk away from my jobs. If I miss a single paycheck, we lose the apartment." Keanu nodded, his tone even. "I understand. That's why I talked to the program director. They have sponsorships for participants who qualify. They'll cover your tuition, and they'll even provide a small stipend during training. You won't lose your income." Emily stared at him, completely still. The rain in the distance began again, faint and rhythmic. "Why would you do this?" she finally asked. "You don't even know me." Keanu smiled faintly. "Maybe I don't, but I know what it feels like to see someone fighting alone when they shouldn't have to." Emily stood frozen, the flyer trembling slightly in her hands. The words blurred as she blinked rapidly, fighting the sting behind her eyes. "You really went to all that trouble?" she asked quietly. "It wasn't trouble," Keanu said. "It was the right thing to do." Sophia was still studying the colored pencils, her face glowing with excitement, as she whispered to herself the names of the colors printed on the box: crimson red, ocean blue, honey gold. Her joy filled the quiet morning, an innocence untouched by life's weight. Emily swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can accept all of this. It feels like too much." Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, Emily. Too much is when someone gives up everything and still has nothing left. This," he gestured toward the bags, the pencils, and the flyer. "This is just a beginning." Emily lowered her gaze. "I've forgotten what beginnings feel like." "Then maybe it's time to remember," he said gently. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion and something deeper, hope, but fragile, like glass. "You really believe I could do this?" "I don't just believe it," Keanu said. "I've seen it. You talk about cooking like it's a heartbeat. You remember flavors, stories, faces. It's all still there. You just need someone to remind you that it matters." For the first time in a long while, Emily let the silence sit. She turned the flyer over, running her thumb across the embossed logo. The rain had stopped again, and the faint light of dawn began to push through the clouds, tinting the sky a soft gold. Sophia tugged at her sleeve. "Mama," she said softly, "if you do the cooking class, can I help? I can draw the menus." Emily smiled faintly through the tears forming in her eyes. "You'd make the best menu, sweetheart." Keanu's voice was quiet but firm. "You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it. There's a meeting on Monday morning. They'll be expecting you if you show up." Emily's fingers tightened around the flyer. She let out a shaky laugh. "You really don't take no for an answer, do you?" He smiled. "Not when it comes to second chances." The words lingered in the air, soft and sincere. Emily wiped her eyes quickly before they could fall. "You're impossible," she said, half laughing. "Maybe," he replied, "but I think your grandmother would want you to try." At that, Emily froze again. Something in her chest cracked open. She looked toward Sophia, then back at Keanu, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "She would," she whispered. "She really would." Keanu nodded once, as if that settled it. "Then it's time," he said. Emily exhaled, long and slow, the tension melting from her shoulders. "Maybe it is," she whispered. Sophia threw her arms around her mother's waist. "You're going to do it, Mama. We'll have our restaurant one day." Emily hugged her daughter back, tears slipping free this time. "We'll see, sweetheart. We'll see." Keanu turned toward his motorcycle, pulling on his gloves. "I'll stop by next week," he said lightly. "Maybe you can tell me how the first day went." Emily looked up, eyes bright, despite the fatigue. "You'll come back?" He smiled. "I said I would, didn't I?" As the motorcycle roared to life, Sophia waved with both hands, her laughter echoing against the empty street. Emily watched him go, the morning mist curling around the fading sound of the engine. When silence returned, she glanced down at the flyer again. For the first time in years, the words culinary training program didn't look unreachable. They looked like a door waiting to be opened. She tucked the paper carefully into her jacket pocket and whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time." Monday morning came faster than Emily expected. The city was still half asleep as she stood outside the community center, holding the flyer in one hand and her worn handbag in the other. Her stomach twisted with nerves, and the soft hum of traffic in the distance only seemed to make the world feel bigger and her smaller. She had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was making a mistake. Sophia had woken up early, slipping a little drawing into her mother's bag before she left. When Emily unfolded it on the bus, her breath caught. It was a picture of her wearing a chef's hat, standing behind a counter filled with colorful dishes. Above her head, in Sophia's uneven handwriting, were 3 words that made her chest tighten. Mama can cook. Now, standing outside the glass doors of the building, Emily felt the weight of both fear and hope pressing down on her shoulders. Her fingers brushed the flyer again, tracing the printed logo, Culinary Training Program for Single Mothers. The very words that had seemed impossible now felt close enough to touch, yet fragile enough to vanish if she hesitated too long. She almost turned back. Her mind whispered all the reasons she shouldn't be there. The rent due next week. The exhaustion waiting for her at her night job. The fear of failing in front of strangers. But then she remembered Keanu's words. Sometimes, dreams feed the soul first. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of yeast and herbs. The space was warm, bright, and alive with the sound of laughter and chopping knives. Long stainless steel tables gleamed under the overhead lights, and a dozen women stood at them, wearing aprons and nervous smiles. Emily's heart pounded. She didn't know a single person there. A woman in her 60s approached, her silver hair tied neatly back, her eyes kind but sharp with experience. "You must be Emily Carter," she said, extending a flour-dusted hand. "I'm Mrs. Donovan, the head instructor. Welcome to your new beginning." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "My new beginning?" Mrs. Donovan smiled warmly. "That's what I call this place. Most of the women who come here have been told their best years are behind them. But I say the best meals and the best stories are still waiting to be made." Something in her tone melted the ice in Emily's chest. She nodded slowly. "I'm happy to be here." "Good, Mrs. Donovan said, handing her a clean apron. "Then let's start cooking." Mrs. Donovan led Emily to a workstation near the front, stocked neatly with utensils, fresh vegetables, and spices. The sight alone stirred something inside her that had been buried for years. Her hands hovered uncertainly over the cutting board, unsure whether to begin. The other women chatted softly, each one wearing the same mix of nervousness and cautious excitement. Mrs. Donovan clapped her hands to gather attention. "All right, ladies," she said with a cheerful firmness. "Today isn't about perfection. It's about remembering what brought you here. Every ingredient tells a story, and we're going to find yours again." As the class began, she started to slice tomatoes, the sound of the knife tapping rhythmically against the board. Her movements were hesitant at first, but soon, muscle memory began to take over. It felt familiar, comforting even. The scent of sautéing onions filled the air, and she closed her eyes for a moment, the smell pulling her back in time to her grandmother's kitchen. She could almost hear Nana humming softly by the stove, stirring sauce in a heavy pot while sunlight streamed through the window. For a brief moment, the noise of the classroom faded, replaced by that old melody in her mind. Mrs. Donovan stopped behind her and watched quietly for a moment before speaking. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Emily nodded, smiling faintly. "Since I was a kid, my grandmother taught me everything I know." "Then you've got more than a head start," Mrs. Donovan said with a grin. "You've got heart, and that's something no one can teach." Emily laughed softly, the first genuine laugh that had escaped her in weeks. She continued cooking, letting herself get lost in the rhythm. Her hands found confidence with every movement, chopping, mixing, tasting. When the instructor asked for volunteers to present their dishes, Emily hesitated only a second before stepping forward. She placed her plate, a simple tomato and basil pasta, on the counter before the group. "It's not much," she said, her voice modest, "but it reminds me of home." The class gathered around, and Mrs. Donovan took a forkful. Her expression softened. "It tastes like memory," she said simply. The compliment hit Emily harder than she expected. She smiled, but her throat tightened. It had been so long since anyone acknowledged her for something beyond hard work and survival. For a moment, she stood there in silence, letting the warmth of the moment wash over her. Across the city, in a quiet office, Keanu sat at a desk reviewing a small stack of papers. On top was a confirmation form from the same culinary program. His signature was nowhere to be found. He had made sure the donation was anonymous, but the note beside it read, "Participant scholarship secured. Fees fully covered." He smiled to himself, imagining Emily in a kitchen surrounded by light instead of fluorescent bulbs. It was a good thought, one that made the world feel a little less heavy. By the end of the first day, the classroom smelled of garlic, butter, and laughter. The women sat together at the long table, tasting one another's dishes, trading stories of how they had ended up here. Some were widows, others recently divorced, others still fighting to rebuild their lives after losing everything. Emily listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. When it was her turn, she hesitated, then spoke softly. "I used to think my story was just about working to survive," she said. "But today reminded me that I used to create, that maybe I still can." The room grew quiet for a moment before someone across the table said, "You can. We all can." The words settled into her like warmth spreading through her chest. Mrs. Donovan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's what I want you to remember," she said. "This kitchen isn't about escaping your life. It's about reclaiming it." When class ended, Emily lingered, cleaning her station longer than necessary. She ran her fingers over the polished counter, feeling the smooth metal under her fingertips. It was more than a workspace, it was a promise. Outside, the afternoon light filtered through the clouds. Sophia was waiting on a bench near the entrance, kicking her legs and holding her sketchbook close. When she saw her mother, she jumped up, waving a new drawing. "Look, Mama," she shouted excitedly. Emily crouched to see it. The drawing showed her standing in a white apron, a chef's hat tilted slightly to one side, holding a spoon in one hand, and a smile on her face. Above her was a bright yellow sun, and beside her, Sophia had drawn herself, holding a plate of pasta. In uneven letters, the words "Mama's Kitchen" stretched across the top. Emily pressed a hand over her heart, her eyes stinging. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I told everyone at school that my mama's learning to be a chef," Sophia said proudly. "They said you're going to be famous." Emily laughed through her tears. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, sweetheart. But you're happy, Mama. I can tell," Sophia said, smiling wide. Emily stood, taking her daughter's hand. "I think I am," she said softly, for the first time in a long while. As they walked to the bus stop, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it in. Something inside her shifted, something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging, of purpose. That night, when she tucked Sophia into bed, the little girl clutched her new box of colored pencils. "Can I draw the restaurant tomorrow?" she asked sleepily. "Of course," Emily said, brushing her hair back gently. "Draw it big. We're going to need room for dreams." Downstairs, Emily sat by the window, the city lights reflecting off the rain-slick streets. She opened the course booklet, her name printed clearly at the top. And for the first time since her grandmother's kitchen, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was beginning. The following weeks tested Emily in ways she hadn't expected. Every day began before sunrise and ended long after midnight. She worked her morning cleaning shift, hurried home to make breakfast for Sophia, and then took 2 buses to the culinary center for class. By the time she returned to the gas station for her night job, her body ached and her swollen ankles reminded her that she was 7 months pregnant. Yet every morning, she found herself smiling a little more. The kitchen had become her sanctuary. The clang of metal pans, the smell of herbs, the hiss of oil, it all reminded her she was building something again. Mrs. Donovan noticed it too. "You're glowing, Emily," she said one afternoon, watching her stir a pot of soup. "That's not just from the heat." Emily laughed softly. "Maybe it's the garlic," she said, though she knew it was something deeper. It was hope taking root again. Even in her exhaustion, she never missed a day. The other students started calling her the Quiet Storm. She worked hard, asked questions, and always stayed late to help clean up. Some nights, her back throbbed so badly that she had to pause between steps, but she never let herself stop completely. Each cut of a knife and each knead of dough reminded her that she was still moving forward. One afternoon during a bread-making session, as the class kneaded dough to soft music playing from a small radio, Emily felt something shift inside her belly. She gasped, pressing a hand to her stomach. Mrs. Donovan turned quickly. "Are you all right?" Emily's face broke into a wide smile. "He kicked," she said softly, eyes glistening. The room fell silent for a moment before the women began to clap and cheer. Laughter filled the kitchen, bright and warm. Emily wiped her eyes, laughing too. "He's cooking too," she said, through tears. The moment lingered in everyone's memory. It wasn't just about the baby. It was about resilience, about life continuing even in struggle. That day, the class shared her joy as if it were their own. At home that evening, Sophia sat cross-legged on the couch, sketching while Emily studied her recipe notes. "Mama," she said, tapping her pencil against her paper, "I'm naming this recipe Sunset Lasagna. It's orange like the sky and red like Grandma's sauce." Emily smiled, running a hand through her daughter's hair. "That's perfect," she said. "Every color can be a flavor." Sophia grinned proudly and flipped the page. "Then tomorrow we'll make blue sky soup," Emily laughed, closing her book. "Only if it doesn't taste like crayons." The sound of their laughter filled the small apartment. For the first time in years, the walls no longer felt like they were closing in. They felt like home. As the weeks went on, Emily's world became a careful dance between exhaustion and small victories. Her belly grew heavier, her body slower, but her spirit unexpectedly stronger. She would arrive at class each morning, clutching a cup of weak coffee, smiling even when her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Mrs. Donovan noticed. One morning, she called Emily aside before class began. "You're pushing yourself hard," she said gently. "Are you sure you can handle all this?" Emily nodded, her hands resting on her belly. "I have to," she said simply. "For her, for him, for us." Mrs. Donovan smiled knowingly. "Then let's make sure you do it right. Remember, good food takes patience, not speed." That day's lesson was on sauces. The kitchen filled with the scent of roasted garlic and simmering tomatoes. Emily stirred slowly, humming under her breath a tune her grandmother used to hum when the house was alive with family and laughter. When she tasted the sauce, the warmth spread through her like a promise. She realized it wasn't just the food changing, it was her. At night, she would return home and find Sophia waiting by the table with open notebooks and colored pencils scattered everywhere. The little girl helped her study, pointing to each recipe and matching them with drawings she had made. "This one's emerald soup," Sophia said proudly, "because it's green like spring." Emily smiled. "And what about this one?" she asked, pointing to a drawing of pasta. Sophia tapped her chin thoughtfully. "That's Golden Hope pasta, because it makes everyone happy when they eat it." Emily laughed softly, brushing her daughter's hair back. "You're my little chef already." "Not yet," Sophia replied seriously. "I'm your assistant, like Keanu is your helper." The mention of his name made Emily pause. Keanu had stopped by the community center twice since she began. He never made a big entrance, never stayed long. The first time, he brought a small bag of fresh herbs for the class, claiming a local farm had extras. The second time, he stood quietly at the back of the kitchen, watching as the students prepared their dishes. When their eyes met, he smiled faintly and gave her a small nod, a silent "keep going." Emily never asked why he cared so much. She didn't need to. There was something honest about his quietness, a kind of respect that made her see him not as a movie star, but as a man who understood pain and persistence. One late afternoon when the class ended and the sky outside was streaked with orange, she walked out to find Keanu sitting on his motorcycle near the curb. He wasn't waiting for applause or gratitude. He was just there. "How was class?" he asked, smiling softly. Emily handed him a small container, wrapped in foil. "Try this. It's called Golden Hope Pasta." He opened it, inhaled the aroma, and laughed quietly. "That sounds like something I need." As he tasted it, Emily watched him closely, uncertain. Then he looked up and nodded. "You've got something special here." Her eyes softened. "We both know. It's not just about the food." Keanu smiled. "No," he said quietly. "It's about finding yourself again." That night, when Emily returned home, Sophia was asleep on the couch, her drawings scattered across the floor. Emily picked one up, a new one. It showed her cooking beside Keanu, both smiling under a sign that read, "La Cucina di Nonna." She stood there for a long moment, heart full, and whispered, "We're getting closer, Nonna. We're almost there." The night began like any other. Emily had finished her shift at the gas station and returned home late. Her body sore, but her spirit light. Sophia was asleep, her tiny arm draped over a stuffed bear. The apartment smelled faintly of tomato sauce and crayons, a scent that felt like family. Emily eased into the couch, rubbing her swollen belly. The baby had been restless lately, but tonight the movement felt different, stronger, more urgent. She told herself it was nothing, just fatigue from a long day. She still had recipes to review for class, but her eyelids grew heavy. When she finally drifted off, the world was quiet and full of small dreams. Sophia, laughing in a kitchen, the smell of fresh bread, Keanu's calm voice telling her, "You're doing great." A sudden pain jolted her awake. It came sharp and deep. Then another wave followed, stronger. She clutched her stomach, trying to breathe through it. Panic crept up her spine. "Not now," she whispered. "Please, not now." Sophia stirred at the sound, blinking sleepily. "Mama?" Emily tried to smile through the pain. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." But her voice trembled, and the next contraction tore through her words. Sophia's eyes widened. "Mama, are you hurt?" Emily could barely stand. "Go next door. Mrs. Klein, tell her to call an ambulance." The little girl ran barefoot across the hallway, pounding on the neighbor's door until lights flicked on. Within minutes, sirens cut through the night air. Emily lay on the floor, one hand gripping the edge of the couch, the other pressed over her belly. The sound of distant footsteps, voices, and Sophia's frightened cries blurred together as darkness folded around her. When Emily opened her eyes again, she was in a hospital room. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, and the rhythmic beeping of machines echoed softly. Her body ached in every place imaginable. She turned her head slowly. A nurse stood nearby, adjusting. "An IV drip. Where's my baby?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. The nurse's expression softened. "He's in the NICU. He came early, about 6 weeks, but he's a fighter. The doctors are taking good care of him." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "He's alive?" The nurse nodded with a kind smile. "He's small, but strong." Emily let out a trembling breath. "His name," she whispered, "is Lucas." For the next several days, Emily split her time between rest and visiting the neonatal intensive care unit. Lucas was tiny, his body wrapped in tubes and wires, his chest rising and falling beneath a soft blanket. She pressed her hand gently against the glass incubator, whispering, "You hold on, little one. Mama's here." Sophia visited every evening after school, holding drawings up to the glass pictures of her baby brother with bright blue eyes and a smile as wide as the sun. "He's gonna be okay, Mama," she said confidently. "He's just sleeping so he can get strong." Emily smiled weakly, though her heart was heavy. Each day brought new medical updates, some hopeful, others terrifying. And with them came bills. The following days blurred into one another. Emily stayed by the glass window of the neonatal intensive care unit, watching the tiny bundle that was her son. Lucas lay under the soft blue light, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, tubes and wires tracing over his fragile body. Every sound, the beeping monitors, the nurse's hurried footsteps felt louder than her thoughts. She prayed in silence, her hands pressed together so tightly they ached. Sophia stood beside her, her small face pale and serious. "He's so tiny, Mama," she whispered. Emily nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "He's strong, sweetheart. Strong like you." The nurses encouraged her to rest, but she refused to leave. Each day, she whispered to Lucas through the glass, telling him stories of her grandmother's kitchen, of Sophia's drawings, of dreams waiting for him when he grew strong enough to come home. Her voice trembled, but it never broke. When the doctor finally told her that Lucas was stable enough to breathe on his own, she nearly collapsed from relief. She pressed her forehead to the glass, tears streaming freely. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "You really did it." But her relief didn't last long. A week later, a stack of envelopes arrived from the hospital billing department. She sat at the foot of her bed that night, hands trembling as she opened them one by one. Each sheet was covered in numbers, amounts so large they made her chest tighten. Her part-time income could barely cover rent, let alone medical bills. The hope she had built over the past months began to crumble. Sophia walked in quietly and sat beside her. "Mama?" Emily quickly wiped her tears. "It's okay, honey. I'm just tired." Sophia's eyes filled with worry. "You always say that." Emily forced a smile and pulled her daughter close. "We'll be okay," she whispered, though her heart didn't believe it. The next morning, she went to the hospital to speak with the billing office, desperate to negotiate a payment plan. The woman behind the counter gave her a gentle look and reached for a folder. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "there's something you should see." Emily's stomach knotted as the woman handed her an envelope. She opened it slowly, expecting another bill. But inside was a single sheet of paper with the hospital's logo across the top. Her eyes scanned the bold letters near the bottom. Account balance, paid in full. Her mouth fell open. "There must be a mistake," she stammered. "This can't be right." The receptionist smiled softly. "It's right. The payment was made anonymously yesterday." Emily's hands trembled as she flipped the page over. At the bottom corner, barely legible, was a short note typed in simple black ink. "With love and hope, K.R." Her knees nearly gave out. She pressed a hand over her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Around her, the noise of the hospital faded. Sophia tugged her sleeve. "Mama, what's wrong?" Emily knelt, clutching the letter. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everything's finally right." The morning air was crisp when Emily stepped outside with Lucas bundled in her arms. The city was waking slowly, golden light spilling over the rooftops. It had been 3 weeks since they left the hospital, and life was beginning to find a rhythm again. The bills had been paid, though she still couldn't say the words without her throat tightening. Every time she saw the initials K.R., her heart filled with gratitude and confusion. Keanu hadn't appeared since that day, and part of her wondered if she'd imagined his quiet kindness. But deep down, she knew better. He wasn't someone who did things for recognition. He did them because it was right. Sophia skipped ahead on the sidewalk, holding a small sketchbook in one hand and Lucas's tiny hat in the other. "Mama, can we go by Mrs. Donovan's today? She said she wants to see my new drawings." "After lunch," Emily said softly, smiling at her daughter's energy. "We have somewhere else to be first." Mrs. Donovan had called the night before, her tone oddly mysterious. She told Emily someone wanted to see her, that there was a surprise waiting. Emily assumed it was another class project, or maybe a congratulatory visit. What she didn't expect was the sight that greeted her when they turned onto Maple Street. At the end of the block stood Keanu, leaning casually against a lamppost. He was dressed simply, a dark jacket and jeans, his expression calm but purposeful. Sophia spotted him first and waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Keanu!" she shouted, running up to him. He grinned, crouching down to her level. "Hey, Sophia, how's my favorite? Artist?" She held up her sketchbook proudly. "I made new ones. And look, Mama's learning to make desserts now." Keanu chuckled. That's great news. I might have to be your first taste tester. Emily caught up, slightly out of breath but smiling. You really have a way of showing up when life doesn't expect it. He shrugged lightly. I like surprises. Then he nodded toward the small building beside them, a quiet storefront with paper-covered windows and a for lease sign hanging crookedly on the door. Emily frowned. What's this? That's what I wanted to show you, he said. He gestured for her to step closer. What do you see? Emily looked at the building, puzzled. I see an empty shop? Keanu shook his head slowly. Look closer. She squinted through the papered glass, her reflection faint against the light inside. It looks like a restaurant space, she murmured. But it's empty. Keanu smiled faintly. Not for long. She turned to him, confusion deepening. I don't understand. That's because you haven't heard the plan yet, he said softly. This place is yours, Emily. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What? No, it can't be. It's not a gift, Keanu interrupted gently. It's a partnership. You'll run it. I'll help you start it. Emily froze where she stood, her mind struggling to process his words. A partnership? She repeated quietly. Keanu, this is too much. You've already done enough for me, for my family. He shook his head with calm conviction. You've done the hard part. You kept going when most people would have given up. All I'm doing is giving your dream a door to open. She glanced again at the storefront. The morning sunlight reflected off the glass, and for a moment she saw Sophia's drawing superimposed over it in her mind. Bright colors, tables, smiling faces, and a handwritten sign above the door that read La Cucina di Nonna, the same name she had told him months ago, the same one her grandmother once whispered with pride. Her voice trembled. You remembered. Keanu smiled softly. I told you I don't forget. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing the interior. The space was simple, bare floors, plain white walls, and an empty counter, but it carried a warmth she couldn't explain. There were boxes of cookware stacked neatly along the back, a few tables waiting to be assembled, and a faint smell of fresh paint. Emily stepped inside slowly, her breath catching. This is real. Mrs. Donovan emerged from the back, wiping her hands on an apron. It sure is, she said with a grin. We've been working on this for weeks. Keanu brought the idea, and a few of us pulled some favors to make it happen. The community's been behind you more than you realize. Emily covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. Say you'll cook, Mrs. Donovan said warmly. That's all anyone wants from you. Sophia wandered through the space, running her small hand along the countertop. Mama, she said excitedly. It looks just like my picture. Even the window. Keanu watched her with quiet satisfaction. She's your biggest inspiration, he said softly. She's my everything, Emily replied, turning to him. But I can't take this. It's too much. I don't deserve. He stopped her gently. You deserve this more than anyone I know. And it's not about what you take. It's about what you'll give back. This restaurant will feed more than people, it'll feed hope. You've already proven that. She took a shaky breath, staring at the empty space that now carried her dream. I don't even know where to begin. Start with a name, Keanu said. You already have one. Her lips curved into a tearful smile. La Cucina di Nonna. Keanu nodded. Then, that's what it'll be. A place where love is the main ingredient. Sophia tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mama, can I draw the sign? Emily crouched, wiping her eyes and kissing Sophia's forehead. Yes, sweetheart. You'll draw it. Mrs. Donovan clapped her hands together. Then, it's settled. We open our doors soon. Emily turned to Keanu one last time. How can I ever thank you? He smiled faintly, his eyes warm and steady. By believing in yourself, the rest will take care of itself. The morning of the grand opening dawned bright and clear, sunlight spilling across the freshly painted sign above the door La Cucina di Nonna. The gold lettering gleamed against the deep red background, just as Sophia had drawn it. Emily stood in front of the restaurant with her daughter's hand in hers, and Lucas cradled against her chest, taking in the sight. For the first time in years, she didn't feel fear in her chest. She felt peace. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with nervous excitement. Mrs. Donovan moved briskly between the tables, checking the placements and taste-testing sauces one last time. "Everything's perfect," she said, handing Emily a clean apron. "Now, it's time to make some memories." Emily tied the apron around her waist and looked around. The small space that had once been an empty storefront now glowed with life. The soft hum of conversation filled the air, mingling with the smell of garlic, fresh basil, and baked bread. Strings of lights hung above each table, and framed photos of her grandmother's recipes lined the walls. Sophia darted between tables, handing out the hand-drawn menus she had made with her new colored pencils. Each menu was a small work of art, covered with tiny illustrations of pasta, soups, and smiling customers. The guests adored them, complimenting her on every page. When the doors officially opened, the line stretched down the block. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had heard about Emily's story came to show support. Every person who entered brought flowers, cards, or simply words of encouragement. Some had followed her journey through the community page Mrs. Donovan had set up. Others were locals who remembered her from the gas station. Emily greeted everyone personally, thanking them, hugging them, laughing in disbelief at the crowd. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered to Mrs. Donovan, who squeezed her hand and said, "Believe it. You earned every bit of it." From his less quiet corner near the window, Keanu watched it all unfold. He wore a simple black shirt and sat alone, as he preferred. He didn't want to draw attention to himself. To everyone else, he was just another guest, but to Emily, he was the reason any of it existed. When their eyes met across the room, she smiled, and he gave a small nod, a silent reminder that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the first plates began to go out, the aroma of lasagna filled the room. It was the same recipe her grandmother had passed down, the one Emily used to cook as a girl in that sunlit kitchen in Italy. The sauce simmered for hours, rich and deep, filling the restaurant with a comforting warmth that felt like home. Mrs. Donovan tasted a small bite and wiped a tear from her eye. "You did it, Emily. This is what love tastes like." Emily looked around the bustling room, laughter and chatter echoing off the walls, and whispered, "Nonna would have loved this." As the evening unfolded, the restaurant glowed with more than light. It pulsed with warmth. Plates clinked, conversations overlapped, and laughter filled every corner. Sophia moved proudly from table to table, helping the servers with her small notepad, making sure every guest had a smile. Lucas slept peacefully in a cradle by the counter, wrapped in a soft blanket that smelled faintly of flour and sugar. Emily worked behind the counter, assembling dishes with the focus of someone who had finally come home. She sprinkled herbs with practiced care, tasting the sauce before every serving. When she finally carried a plate to the quiet table in the corner, her steps slowed. Keanu looked up as she approached, a smile already tugging at his lips. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me," he teased gently. "Never," Emily said, setting the dish before him. "It's my grandmother's lasagna, the same one you heard about that night at the station." He picked up his fork and took a slow bite. In a moment, he didn't speak. He simply closed his eyes, letting the flavors linger. When he finally looked at her again, his voice was low, full of quiet admiration. "It tastes like memory." Emily's chest tightened and her eyes shimmered. "That's exactly what I wanted it to be." The rest of the room seemed to fade around them for a moment. It wasn't just food, it was everything that had brought her here. The struggle, the courage, the kindness that had found her in the rain. Sophia ran over and threw her arms around Emily's waist. "Mama, everyone loves the food. They said they'll come back every week." Emily laughed, crouching to hug her tightly. "Then we better start planning tomorrow's menu." Mrs. Donovan joined them with a proud smile. "You've done it, dear. You've turned what once broke you into something that heals others." As the night continued, the guests lingered long after their meals were finished. Some stayed just to talk. others to watch Emily move gracefully between the tables, her face glowing with fulfillment. Even the smallest details, the flicker of candles, the clinking of glasses, felt like pieces of a miracle stitched together by unseen hands. Keanu remained seated until the crowd began to thin. He stood quietly, leaving an envelope on the table. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "Every kitchen needs a story. Yours just became one worth sharing." When Emily found it later that night, she pressed the letter to her heart and smiled through her tears. Outside, the city had gone still. She stepped into the doorway, looking at the golden sign above her head. La Cucina di Nonna gleamed under the streetlight. She whispered softly, almost to the wind, "Thank you." And somewhere down the quiet street, the sound of a motorcycle faded into the distance, carrying with it the quiet echo of kindness that had built a dream back to life. Months passed, and La Cucina di Nonna became more than just a restaurant. It became a heartbeat in the neighborhood. What began as a small dream born under the flickering lights of a gas station had now turned into a living, breathing symbol of hope. The doors that once opened to hungry customers now welcomed laughter, music, and stories from every corner of the community. Emily had kept her promise. Every Sunday afternoon, the restaurant transformed into a place of kindness and connection. Single mothers who once struggled to find work now stood proudly in the kitchen beside her, wearing aprons and smiles that spoke of new beginnings. Retired chefs volunteered to teach them techniques, and Mrs. Donovan continued to mentor with her patient wisdom. What had started as Emily's comeback had become a shared journey for dozens of others. On the first Sunday of each month, Emily closed the register early and turned the day into a free community dinner. Families who couldn't afford a meal sat side by side with regular patrons, sharing lasagna, laughter, and stories. Elderly neighbors who once ate alone found comfort in the bustling warmth of her dining room. Emily always said the same thing before every meal began. "Here, no one eats alone." Sophia loved those Sundays most. She would run from table to table, refilling water glasses, handing out crayons to children, and drawing smiley faces on every menu. Lucas, now a healthy baby with curious eyes, often sat in a bassinet near the counter, watching the swirl of life around him. Emily joked that he was the restaurant's smallest manager. Word of La Cucina di Nonna began to spread. Local newspapers wrote about it first, calling it the restaurant that feeds both body and soul. A few weeks later, an online article about Emily's story went viral. The comments flooded and people from across the country wrote how her journey reminded them that kindness could still change lives. Some even drove hours just to eat there, hoping to feel what the article described as the warmth you can taste. But what touched Emily most weren't the headlines or the crowds. It was the quiet moments. The mother who told her that working in the kitchen had given her confidence to start again. The young man who said volunteering there helped him stay sober. The elderly woman who left every Sunday with tears in her eyes whispering, "My late husband would have loved this place." Emily never forgot those stories. She kept a journal behind the counter where she wrote down each one, a growing collection of lives touched by a dream she once thought she had lost. Every night before closing, she would glance at the empty tables and whisper a small thank you to her grandmother, to Keanu, to the universe for not letting her give up. In time, La Cucina di Nonna became a second home for people who needed one. The walls carried stories of resilience, the kind that began quietly and grew strong through shared meals. Emily started something new, small evening workshops she called Cooking for the Heart. At first, only a handful of people attended, sitting nervously at the long tables, unsure of what to expect. But by the end of each session, they were laughing, rolling dough, and trading memories as if they'd known one another for years. She taught them more than recipes. She taught healing through flavor, how chopping vegetables could steady the mind, how kneading dough could release tension, how simmering soup could remind someone that patience creates beauty. Her voice was gentle, her lessons simple, yet profound. "Cooking," she told them one night, "isn't about feeding hunger. It's about reminding yourself that you're still here, that you still matter." Word spread quickly. Soon, local schools began sending students to volunteer as part of their community projects. The laughter of teenagers joined the rhythm of the kitchen, blending with the soft voices of mothers and the wisdom of the elderly. The restaurant's walls, once plain and white, were now decorated with photos of volunteers, guests, and handwritten thank you notes. One corner displayed Sophia's colorful drawings, each one capturing a moment from their journey. Her mother stirring a pot, Keanu smiling from a corner table, Lucas reaching for a wooden spoon. Everywhere Emily looked, she saw connection. On one table, a retired teacher helped a teenage boy read a recipe. At another, a grandmother taught a young woman how to roll perfect gnocchi. Across the room, Sophia was explaining her newest idea to the volunteers, a children's menu she designed entirely around the colors of her drawings. "We'll call this one Sunshine Soup," she said, holding up a bright yellow crayon. Emily watched her daughter with pride, realizing that kindness had rippled far beyond what she or Keanu could have imagined. It wasn't just about the restaurant anymore. It was about what it represented, a chance for people to be seen, to belong, to start again. One evening after closing, when the last chairs were stacked and the lights dimmed, Emily stepped outside with a cup of coffee. The city was quiet, and the sign above her glowed softly under the street lamp. She thought of that first night at the gas station, the rain, the exhaustion, the moment she had nearly given up. Then she thought of Keanu. He still visited now and then, always quietly, always without attention. He never stayed long, but he always checked in, asking how the restaurant was doing, how Sophia's drawings were coming along, how Lucas was growing. He never asked for credit, never took any, but his presence was a reminder of where it all began. Emily looked up at the stars that night and whispered, "Thank you." Inside, Sophia's laughter echoed faintly from the back room, and Lucas stirred in his crib. The world felt small, warm, and full again. La Cucina di Nonna had become more than a restaurant. It was proof that a single act of kindness could create a legacy far greater than anyone could ever measure. The first chill of autumn had settled over the city when Emily noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. It was early evening, and La Cucina di Nonna glowed softly under its golden lights. The tables inside were nearly full, laughter and the clinking of dishes spilling out onto the sidewalk. She was at the counter, wiping down a tray, when her eyes caught a man standing motionless near the window, hands deep in his coat pockets, watching quietly. For a moment, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. It had been over a year since she'd seen that face, the same dark hair, though now streaked with gray, the same hesitant posture. Marco. The name flickered through her thoughts, like an echo from a distant life. He hadn't aged much, but there was something different in his eyes, a weariness she hadn't known before. Their gazes met through the glass, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. He hesitated before pushing open the door, the chime above it ringing like a memory breaking the silence. The warmth of the restaurant wrapped around him, mingling with the smell of tomato sauce and baked bread. Emily stood still, heart pounding, every part of her unsure of what to feel. "Emily," he said softly, his voice lower than she remembered, "you look different." She managed a steady breath. "People change, Marco." He glanced around, taking in the sight of the busy restaurant, the framed photos, the laughter. Sophia was setting napkins at a nearby table, humming to herself, unaware of who had just walked in. Lucas cooed softly from his playpen near the counter. The life Marco had once walked away from was all around him, strong, beautiful, whole. "This is yours?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "All of this?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, it's called La Cucina di Nonna." Marco took a few steps closer, his eyes sweeping over the space as if searching for the right words. "It's incredible," he murmured. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Emily replied gently. But the quiet between them carried a weight that neither could ignore. Finally, he spoke again. "I came to say I'm sorry. I've thought about what I did every day since I left. I was scared, selfish. I didn't know how to handle things, and I took the coward's way out." Emily listened in silence. She had imagined this moment countless times over the years, but now that it was here, It didn't feel like revenge or justice. It felt like closure waiting to happen. He looked at her, his voice trembling. I see what you've built, what you've become, and I know I don't deserve to be here. But I needed to see it for myself, to see that you're okay. Emily met his gaze steadily. I wasn't okay for a long time, she said softly, but I found my way back. Marco nodded slowly, guilt shadowing his expression. I can see that. You look stronger now, happier. His eyes drifted toward Sophia, who was now watching from across the room, frozen mid-step, her small hands still clutching a stack of folded napkins. Papa? She whispered, uncertain if her eyes were deceiving her. The sound of her voice broke him. Marco's face crumpled, and he took a tentative step forward. Sophia, look at you. You've grown so much. She didn't move. The air felt heavy between them, a silence filled with years of absence. Emily placed a hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. It's okay, sweetheart, she said softly. Sophia turned her wide eyes to her mother. Why is he here? Emily knelt, so they were eye level. Sometimes people lose their way, she said. But finding your way back takes courage too. Sophia looked back at her father. You left us, she said simply. Marco swallowed hard, his voice breaking. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I don't expect you to forgive me, Sophia. I just needed to tell, to you, that I'm sorry. The child studied him for a long moment, her brow furrowed in the way Emily recognized from herself. Then, she reached for her mother's hand, gripping it tightly. Mama's my hero, she said quietly. She didn't need help to make everything better. Tears filled Emily's eyes, pride swelling in her chest. She kissed her daughter's hair. That's right, sweetheart. But forgiveness doesn't mean we forget. It just means we let go. Emily rose and faced Marco again. Her voice was steady, gentle, but firm. I forgave you a long time ago, Marco. Not for you, but for me. I couldn't carry that anger anymore. He lowered his head, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Emily said. Some things we lose so we can find ourselves again. You were part of that lesson. Marco nodded, wiping at his eyes. You've built something beautiful here. You and Sophia, and him. He nodded toward the playpen where Lucas babbled softly. He's perfect. Emily smiled faintly. He's the hope that came after the storm. For a moment, neither spoke. Marco finally said, I'll go. I just needed to see it with my own eyes, that you're all right. You can stay for dinner if you'd like, Emily offered kindly. Everyone deserves a warm meal. But Marco shook his head. Not tonight. Maybe another time. I think I need to earn that first. He turned to leave, his shoulders heavy, but his steps lighter than when he had arrived. At the door, he paused and looked back one last time. I'm proud of you, Emily. Truly. As the door closed behind him, Sophia slipped her arms around her mother's waist. Are you okay, Mama? Emily smiled through her tears. I am, sweetheart. Because I finally understand something. What's that? Sophia asked. Emily looked toward the window, where the last traces of daylight faded over the city. That, forgiveness doesn't fix the past, it frees the future. Across the street, under the fading glow of the streetlight, Keanu stood quietly, hands in his pockets. He had witnessed the reunion from afar, his expression calm, proud, and full of quiet respect. He didn't need to step forward. Emily no longer needed saving. She had already saved herself. The night was quiet, the city breathing softly beneath a thin veil of drizzle. The last guests had gone home hours ago, and the lights inside La Cucina di Nonna now glowed dim and warm, reflecting on the wet pavement outside. Emily stood in the doorway, her apron still tied loosely around her waist, the scent of garlic and baked bread lingering in the cool air. Across the street, Keanu leaned against his motorcycle, watching as she locked the front door. He hadn't told her he was coming, he never needed to. Somehow, he always appeared at the right moments, like a steady presence that didn't need explaining. Emily looked up, smiling when she saw him. "You always show up when it rains," she said softly. He chuckled, slipping his hands into his jacket pockets. "Maybe I just like the sound it makes." She walked over, her steps slow but certain. "Or maybe you just like making sure I've closed up properly," she teased. "Maybe a bit of both," he admitted, his voice carrying that familiar calm that always put her at ease. They stood together under the awning, the rain whispering around them. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that existed between people who had already said everything that mattered. Emily leaned back against the wall, exhaling deeply. "It's been a long night," she said. "We had a full house again. Mrs. Donovan says she's never seen so many people come just for soup." Keanu smiled faintly. "It's not just soup, it's hope in a bowl." She laughed softly. "You really think so?" "I know so," he said. "People don't come here just to eat. They come to feel something, to remember what kindness tastes like." The rain began to fall a little harder, tapping gently against the awning above them. Emily looked out at the reflections on the street colors from nearby lights rippling on the slick asphalt. It reminded her of that first night, the way the world had felt so heavy, so uncertain. She turned to him, her voice low. "Do you remember the first night we met? I was freezing, exhausted, and probably more hopeless than I'd ever been." "I remember," he said quietly. "You were working through the pain, pretending everything was fine, and you saw right through it," she said with a small smile. "You saw something I didn't." "I saw someone who hadn't stopped fighting," he replied. Her throat tightened as she looked at him. "You changed everything, Keanu. I don't even know how to thank you." He shook his head gently. "You don't owe me thanks, Emily. You just reminded me that hope can be rebuilt, even after everything feels lost." She studied his face, seeing in him the same humility she'd always admired. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said, "but it's real, and that's enough." For a long moment, neither spoke. The drizzle softened into a gentle mist, and the scent of rain mixed with the aroma of fresh bread drifting from the restaurant. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, gazing down the quiet street. "It's strange," she said finally. "I used to think my story ended that night at the gas station. I didn't know it was just beginning." Keanu's eyes followed the ripples forming in the puddles near their feet. "Sometimes," he said, "life hides its turning points in the places we least expect. You just have to be brave enough to notice them." She smiled faintly. "You noticed mine." He shook his head. "No, Emily. You saved your own life. I just happened to be there when you decided to start over." Her throat tightened. "Still, you believed in me before I did. That kind of faith, it changes everything." Keanu took a slow breath. "Hope is contagious," he said. "You pass it on without realizing it. You've done that for everyone who walks through those doors." He nodded toward the restaurant. "You've built something that gives people a reason to keep going. That's bigger than anything I've ever done." Emily looked at him, her eyes soft with gratitude. "You don't mean that." "I do," he said simply. "Movies fade, fame fades, but kindness, what you've created, it lasts." The street lamp flickered, scattering light across the rain-slick sidewalk. For a moment, the world felt suspended in stillness. Emily exhaled, her breath visible in the cool air. "Do you ever miss the quiet, before everything?" Keanu chuckled under his breath. "I used to. But I think peace isn't about being alone anymore. It's about moments like this, when the world finally feels right, even for a second." She nodded slowly. "That's what it feels like right now." They stood side by side, neither needing to fill the silence. Inside the restaurant, Sophia's drawings lined the walls, glowing faintly through the glass small bursts of color against the dim light. Each picture told a part of their story: the gas station, the cooking classes, the first lasagna. Keanu glanced at them and smiled. "You know, those drawings could be a book someday." Emily laughed softly. "Sophia would love that. She already thinks she's the restaurant's creative director." "She's earned the title," he said. The rain eased, leaving behind a soft hush. Emily looked at him one last time, her voice low. "Keanu, Thank you. For everything. For showing up that night. For never walking away." He met her gaze with a quiet sincerity that seemed to reach deeper than words. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You reminded me that the smallest act of hope can rebuild entire worlds." She blinked back tears, smiling through them. "Then I guess we both rebuilt something." He nodded, starting his motorcycle, the engine humming softly in the stillness. Before putting on his helmet, he looked back once more. "Keep feeding the world, Emily. And you," she said, "keep reminding it to believe again." As he rode off into the mist, the reflection of his taillight shimmered across the wet street like a fading ember. Emily watched until it disappeared, then turned toward the glowing windows of La Cucina di Nonna. Inside, the soft light of her restaurant spilled warmth into the night, proof that even the smallest kindness, once shared, could light an entire world. A full year passed since the night rain fell softly outside La Cucina di Nonna, while Keanu and Emily shared that quiet moment beneath the awning. In those 12 months, the restaurant had grown beyond what Emily ever dared to imagine. The steady hum of conversation and the scent of simmering sauces had become part of the neighborhood's rhythm, as familiar as the morning church bells and the laughter of children in the park. Inside, everything told the story of how far they had come. The front wall was now covered with Sophia's framed drawings, bright bursts of color that captured their journey in crayon and pencil. In the center hung the first sketch she ever made, the one she had drawn with her short red pencil on a rainy night at the gas station. It was framed in wood, placed above a small plaque engraved with 3 words that had become the restaurant's quiet motto: "Dreams start small." Emily walked through the dining area, her apron dusted with flour, her hair loosely tied back. Lucas toddled beside her, clutching a wooden spoon, his tiny feet pattering against the tiled floor. He had inherited his mother's laughter. It filled the restaurant every morning as she prepared for the day. 2 women stood behind the counter, both wearing the same white aprons embroidered with La Cucina di Nonna. They were familiar faces from her old culinary class, women who had once walked into that room just as nervous as Emily had been. Now they were part of her team, strong, proud, and finally standing on their own. "Clara, make sure to save a few trays of lasagna for the shelter delivery," Emily said as she checked the day's orders. Clara nodded. "Already packed and ready, chef." That word chef still made Emily pause every time she heard it. It wasn't a title she chased. It was one she grew into, one born from nights of exhaustion, mornings of courage, and countless acts of faith. The restaurant had become a haven, not just for customers, but for those in need. Every Friday, Emily donated meals to the nearby homeless shelter, filling containers with soup, bread, and pasta dishes made with care. On Sundays, volunteers came early to help prepare free community lunches, just as they had in the beginning. Some of them were mothers like her. Others were students who wanted to learn. And sometimes, older guests who had no family of their own stayed behind just to wash dishes and share stories. Sophia was now 10 years old and taller, her hair tied up in a messy bun as she stood proudly near the register. "Mama," she called, holding up a menu she had redesigned herself. I added a new quote on the back. "Every plate tells a story. What do you think?" Emily smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I think that's perfect," she said. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden patterns on the tables. The smell of basil and roasted tomatoes filled the air as the lunch rush began. A line formed at the door, families, students, construction workers, and retirees all waiting patiently, their conversations blending into a melody of everyday life. Emily moved through it all with calm grace, greeting everyone by name, her warmth turning strangers into friends. Sophia skipped between tables, delivering menus and smiling at every guest. Lucas followed her clumsily, holding his spoon like a prized baton. Every time a customer laughed at his wobbling steps, Sophia announced proudly, "That's my little brother, the assistant chef." At one of the corner tables sat Mrs. Donovan, her white hair tied neatly, a cup of tea steaming in front of her. She had retired from teaching but still came every Thursday to help train the new kitchen volunteers. When Emily brought her a slice of lemon cake, she smiled softly. "You've built something extraordinary, my dear." You've turned a kitchen into a classroom and a community into a family." Emily sat for a brief moment beside her. "It doesn't feel like mine anymore," she said. "It feels like it belongs to everyone who's ever walked through those doors." Mrs. Donovan nodded approvingly. "That's what makes it special. Legacy isn't about ownership, it's about continuation." As the day went on, local journalists arrived to film a small segment about La Cucina di Nonna. They asked Emily for a few words about her journey, and she hesitated at first. Then she looked around the laughter, the colors, the smell of home, and spoke from the heart. "I used to think dreams were fragile," she said, "that once they broke, they couldn't be fixed. But now I know that sometimes the cracks are where the light gets in." Everything you see here, the food, the people, the love, was built from broken pieces that found their way back together. The story aired that weekend and touched countless viewers across the country. Letters began arriving from single parents, chefs, and dreamers who said her story gave them courage. Emily read every one, often tearing up quietly in the back office before going out to the kitchen again. One evening, as the restaurant began to close, Sophia stood in front of the framed drawing on the wall. "Mama," she said, "do you think Grandma Nona can see this from heaven?" Emily's voice caught for a moment. "I think she can," she whispered, "and I think she's proud." Sophia nodded solemnly, then added, "I think Keanu would be proud too." Emily smiled, looking out the window where the sky had turned the same soft gray as that first night they met him. "He already is," she said. As she dimmed the lights and carried Lucas in her arms, she paused one last time to glance around the room. The laughter, the warmth, the framed dreams on the walls, it all shimmered in the quiet glow. La Cucina di Nonna was more than a restaurant now. It was a living promise that hope, once planted, could grow forever. The sun dipped low over Los Angeles, casting a soft golden hue across the quiet street where La Cucina di Nonna stood. The restaurant's windows glowed like lanterns against the fading light, alive with the movement of people and laughter inside. From the sidewalk, the sound of sizzling pans and gentle music floated through the evening air, blending with the rhythmic chatter of diners sharing stories. Inside, Emily stood at the stove, stirring a pot of sauce as the aroma of basil and garlic filled the room. Her apron was dusted with flour, her sleeves rolled up, her hair tied loosely as a strand fell across her cheek. Beside her, Sophia set the tables with fresh flowers, humming the same tune she used to draw to when the restaurant was only a dream on paper. Lucas, now walking confidently, toddled between them with a wooden spoon in his hand, determined to be part of the magic. The camera slowly panned over the room. The warmth of the lights, the faces of customers smiling, the walls lined with drawings, and the framed sketch that started it all. Every corner of the restaurant told the story of perseverance, faith, and the quiet power of kindness. Keanu sat at his usual spot in the corner, watching the scene unfold with that familiar, reflective calm. He didn't need to speak. His eyes said enough: gratitude, pride, peace. He had seen many stories in his life, but this one reminded him of something deeper. That real change rarely happens in noise. It happens in silence, in consistency, in compassion. As the music softened, his voice filled the air in quiet reflection. "Dreams don't fade," he said softly. "They wait for someone to believe again." The camera lingered on Emily's hands as she plated the food. It captured the lines of work, the grace of care, and the love that shaped every dish. The shot shifted to Sophia, carrying a tray to a family seated near the window, her smile bright and unguarded. She stopped for a moment, her eyes meeting Keanu's. "You helped Mama's dream come true," she said with pure sincerity. Keanu smiled, the kind of smile that held no pride, only warmth. "She was always the dream," he said quietly. Outside, the drizzle began again, light and familiar, like a reminder from the night it all began. The reflections on the street shimmered just as they had that evening long ago, when a tired woman at a gas station met a stranger who refused to walk past suffering. But now, the story was complete. The rain wasn't cold anymore, it was cleansing, renewing, alive. Inside, Emily turned off the stove, looked around the room, and exhaled deeply. The restaurant was full, her children were safe, and her dream had not only survived, it had bloomed. She reached for Sophia's hand, then Lucas's, and for a moment, time seemed to hold still. As the evening crowd thinned, Emily wiped her hands on a towel and stepped outside. The drizzle had stopped, leaving the air crisp and clean. She leaned against the doorway, gazing at the glowing sign of La Cucina di Nonna. For a long moment, she simply breathed, her heart full. The neon lights flickered softly against the wet pavement, mirroring the same glow that had once drawn Keanu to stop his motorcycle that night. Keanu stepped out quietly behind her, his hands in his jacket pockets, the faint sound of laughter echoing from inside. They stood side by side, not needing words. The scent of fresh bread drifted through the door, mixing with the damp air. Emily glanced at him with a gentle smile. "You know," she said, "I used to think people like me didn't get second chances. Now I think maybe we just don't recognize them when they come." Keanu looked at her, the drizzle reflecting in his eyes. "Sometimes they look like hard work. Sometimes they look like strangers," he said softly. "But second chances are always there. We just have to reach for them." She nodded, her gaze distant but full of peace, then trailed off. Keanu shook his head slowly. "If you hadn't kept going, none of this would exist," he said. "You turned pain into something beautiful. You didn't just find your dream again, you made it real for everyone who walks through those doors." Emily looked through the window, where Sophia was now helping Lucas place napkins on tables. "You gave me back my faith," she whispered. Keanu smiled faintly. "You gave me back mine." The two shared a long silence, broken only by the sound of the city breathing around them. Inside, the lights dimmed to a soft amber, and music played quietly, a gentle melody that carried through the air like a heartbeat. Keanu turned slightly toward her. "You know, Emily," he said, "the world needs more places like this. Not because of the food, but because of what it stands for. Hope, family, redemption." Emily exhaled, a small tear glinting in her eye. "Then, I guess we'll just have to keep serving that," she said with a smile. The camera lingered as they stood together under the awning, the reflection of the restaurant lights shimmering on the wet ground. In the window behind them, the framed drawing of Sophia's first sketch could be seen clearly, complete, colorful, and alive. Keanu's voice returned, soft and reflective, over cinematic shots of the restaurant closing for the night, of Emily tucking her children in, of the rain falling gently outside. "True kindness isn't grand," he said. "It's quiet, consistent, and it changes lives in ways we may never see." The screen faded to the image of the restaurant at dawn, the sign glowing against the new day. "If this incredible story touched your heart," his voice continued, "share it to remind someone that hope still exists. What dream would you bring back if you had one more chance? Tell us in the comments below.